My father's generation had the Western. My daughter's generation had the superhero movie. But my generation, we had the action movie. The action movie as an event is now over. With the exception of the Fast and the Furious movies, action franchises have been relegated to straight to red box events starring has-beens from 30 to 40 years ago. It's a sad state of affairs for a genre that at one time dominated the box office. I grew up loving these movies. I was a fanatic for the big action stars of the day. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Van Damme. I loved them all. I went to these movies. I devoured them. Sadly, those action megastars of yesteryear, well, they had egos the size of their muscles. And because of that, we never really got to see team-up movies. We never got to see Stallone and Schwarzenegger in their prime, together, sharing the big screen. We never got to see Van Damme versus Steven Seagal. We never got to see Jackie Chan versus Wesley Snipes. The closest that us old-school action fans are ever going to get to having those big event team-up movies are the Expendables films. The first Expendables movie came out in 2010. There were 2 sequels with a 4th film on the way. And while these movies have their fans, myself included, we can all agree that these guys are way past their prime. As cool as it is to see Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis standing side by side, shooting their guns at Van Damme, it may have been a little bit too late. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to imagine that the Expendables films that we did get, they all happened in this little cinematic puzzle that we're going to put together today. They did happen. 2010 Expendables movie came out, followed by the Expendables 2 and 3. Same casts, no changes. No changes except for one thing. The titles are going to change. It's no longer Expendables, Expendables 2, and Expendables 3. Now, these films are going to be called the Expendables 4, the Expendables 5, and the Expendables 6. This what-if scenario that I'm about to propose to you, the Expendables films that we got were sequels to a trilogy of films that came out between 1988 and 1992. So let's go back in time. Let's go back to the late 80s when Stallone was disappointing most of us with Rambo 3. Let's imagine that instead of milking the Rambo franchise, what if Stallone had teamed up with action film director John McTiernan, the man who brought us Die Hard and Predator. What if he had teamed up with John McTiernan and he had said to him, I want to make a film that's like a Dirty Dozen type movie. It's going to be called The Expendables, and let's get all the big action heroes that are famous right now and put them in the same movie with me. Who would have been in that movie? Who would Stallone have recruited? If these people, again, could put their egos aside and share the big screen together. I think you can guess who the very first person I would cast in this 1988 John McTiernan directed Expendables movie would be. To co-star alongside Stallone, that's right, we're bringing in Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, the Expendables movies that we got established that Schwarzenegger and Stallone have a past. So, they were on the same team once. They were both Expendables at one time. Schwarzenegger, in this trilogy of films that we're about to outline, he would basically be playing the Jason Statham type character, the sidekick to Stallone. Now again, can we really imagine Schwarzenegger back then being anybody's sidekick? Or even really co-star? Not really. But it's fun to imagine, isn't it? We've got Stallone, we've got Schwarzenegger. Who else would be on this dream team of Expendables in their prime? We're going with Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson showed up in Expendables 3 as the villain, but It is established in that film that he was once an expendable himself, that he and Stallone were close. So in this scenario, Mel Gibson, he's really the third lead. Stallone's not necessarily the star. He has to share the spotlight with these other two guys. Both huge movie stars at the time. Mel Gibson, we're basically going the Anakin Skywalker route. He's going to start off a good guy. No real hint of a dark side to him. He's just one of the team. He and Stallone and Schwarzenegger are buddies. They're friends. Maybe they fought in Vietnam together. Who else is on this team? Because we got to have more than just the three of them, right? For our fourth expendable, we're going with Jackie Chan. Stallone's been trying for years to get Jackie Chan to join the Expendables, to no avail, but in this perfect world we're talking about, Jackie Chan is indeed an expendable. He's their martial arts expert. He's playing, basically like an early version of what Jet Li played in the actual Expendables trilogy. He'd also provide some comic relief. Jackie Chan's very funny. He's definitely the funniest of all of the action stars. To round out this team, we're going to bring in Mickey Rourke. The first Expendables movie definitely established that Mickey Rourke once fought side by side with Stallone. This is that team. The team that we could only imagine when we watch the actual Expendables trilogy. They got to have some real badass actors to go up against. So the villain in the Expendables 1, the main antagonist, will be none other than Lance Henriksen. If you watch the Van Damme classic Hard Target, you'll know that Lance Henriksen is not to be fucked with. We gotta give him one more though. We gotta have somebody else in there. While Stallone and Lance Henriksen are mixing it up, we gotta have somebody for, let's say Mel Gibson has to fight him, right? Who's that gonna be? Who's gonna be the guy who Mel Gibson goes mano a mano with? I'm going with Michael Biehn. Part of me thinks he should be actually on the team. He should be one of the Expendables. But if he was going to be one of the Expendables, I don't know. As much as I love Michael Biehn, I think he'd get dwarfed by the sheer star power of this Expendables roster that I am suggesting here. So I'm going to put him as one of the villains. He plays a great villain. If you watch The Abyss, he's a fantastic villain in that. You always got to have one guy in an Expendables movie who helps Stallone kind of get his bearings, maybe recruit new people, get weapons, whatever it's going to be. In the first movie, it was Mickey Rourke. In the third movie, for some reason, it was Kelsey Grammer. This movie, it's going to be Carl Weathers. That's right. We're going to have Rocky and Apollo Creed on the big screen together, teamed up, at least for a scene. Now, let's say that the story basically is the story that Mickey Rourke is recalling to Stallone.
You remember that time we was up in Bosnia? We took down them Serb bad boys.
We were laying in the mud, all shot up, blood everywhere.
All our guys were getting chopped up all around us, and there was blood everywhere. I never thought I was going to make it out of there, and I don't know you didn't either.
Let's say it's that story, okay? Do these movies really need much in the way of plot? No, they don't. We're just watching these muscle-bound icons of 80s action teamed up together, kicking ass, blowing shit up. That's what we're here for. Now, there's no doubt that this Expendables movie would have been maybe the biggest hit of 1988 if it had come out that year. So we're going to imagine that this was a giant box office success, that it led to a sequel. Expendables 2, coming out in 1990. Let's say that the director of Expendables 2 is Walter Hill, famed action director. He worked with Schwarzenegger on Red Heat. Now, at the end of Expendables 1, Mickey Rourke's character retires. We saw in the actual Expendables 1, when he's recalling that story, how upset he gets. Let's go ahead and say that this was the last hurrah for him. He's going to open up his tattoo parlor, okay? So we're going to need a new Expendable. Who's going to take Mickey Rourke's place? The obvious choice, the guy we got to have in there. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes appears in Expendables 3. We know he was once a part of the team, so we got to get him in there. He's the rookie. He's the new recruit. We're going to also add in one more person, not really a member of the Expendables team, but somebody who is along for the ride. Maybe a spy, somebody who's going to help them, somebody who works for the government, let's say. I'm going to go ahead and go with Linda Hamilton for this part. That's right, we're bringing in Sarah Connor. She's going to be a part of the team, kinda, for this second movie. These movies are nothing without their villains, so who are the Expendables going to go up against? My pick, and it's also somebody that Stallone has been begging to be a part of this franchise since day one, Kurt Russell. We're bringing in Snake Plissken to be the antagonist of our fictional Expendables 2. Maybe he's some sort of CIA goon. These movies, they always have to have two villains in them, right? So with this one, we're going to bring in somebody for Jackie Chan to have some martial arts fisticuffs with. I'm going with Chow Yun-Fat from the John Woo world into the Expendables world. I don't know why Chow Yun-Fat has not been brought into any of the actual Expendables movies. Huge oversight. As much as Stallone wants Jackie Chan in it, Chow Yun-Fat was like the dark martial arts action star of that time. Much darker than Jackie Chan, much darker than Jet Li. Now, who are we going to have for our cameos in this Expendables 2 movie? Well, we're going to bring in Mickey Rourke for a little cameo, just to sort of remind everybody that he's there. Maybe this is the movie where he starts the tattoo on Stallone's back. But for the new cameo, for the new character that we're going to bring in, I want to bring in somebody who wasn't an action star at the time, but who became one of the biggest action stars of the 21st century. That's right, Mr. Taken himself, Liam Neeson.
Straight Tookin', starring Liam Neeson.
Is there any doubt that this Expendables 2 would have also been a huge success? So we're going to follow it up 2 years later, 1992, with what would have been the trilogy capper. And if you're going to go for the final film in the franchise, you got to go big. We're going with Tony Scott as the director. Classic 80s and 90s action movies that Tony Scott gave us. This is going to be kind of a dark movie. It's going to be a bummer of an ending. It's going to be something that maybe wouldn't have even gone over very well with audiences at the time. You know what has to happen? It's gotta. Mel Gibson goes over to the dark side. He becomes one of the villains in this movie. And we gotta have somebody else to round out the team. Somebody to replace Mel Gibson. So, who are we going to bring in? We're going to bring in an actor that I can't believe has not been in this franchise yet. Danny Trejo. How has Danny Trejo never been in an Expendables movie? It's the most obvious casting in the world. We've got Mel Gibson. He's gone over to the dark side. He's joined the villains, but we got to have some established villains for him to join. Mel Gibson, he's not the main antagonist in this movie. So who is? We got to go big. I'm going with Sean Connery as our final villain in this 80s and 90s Expendables trilogy. Yes, we're going with James Bond, the OG James Bond. Now, in 1992, he wasn't exactly the physical specimen he was in the 60s when he played Bond, but he's Sean Connery. You gotta put him in an Expendables movie. He's the great-granddaddy of action stars. But we're gonna have one more villain in this movie. We gotta have some muscle, right? We gotta have somebody big. We gotta have somebody, for Schwarzenegger to fight. So who are we gonna bring in as the muscle in this third and final Expendables movie? We're gonna bring in Dolph Lundgren. We'll get back to him. Now, you got to have some cameos. The Expendables, they're on a mission for the U.S. government, right? This isn't small potatoes. This is where the Expendables really get mixed up, working with the CIA and stuff that you see in future Expendables movies. So we're going to bring in somebody to play the President of the United States. And if you're going to have somebody in an Expendables movie to play the President, who better than Clint Eastwood? Come on. You gotta have Clint Eastwood in one of these movies. Imagine the cheesy fun that you could have with Clint Eastwood as the president, and maybe at the end of the movie he's got to go in with a gun himself and he's got to start taking out bad guys. Maybe him and Sean Connery get into a fight. They were both young enough at that point to where I'd buy it. We're going to have one more cameo, because there's somebody who I am loath to include in these movies, but he's got to be there. Steven Seagal. I am not a Steven Seagal fan. I never have been. I think his movies were trash across the board, including Under Siege. I know that I had a disagreement about that with a certain Mr. Decker Shadow at one point. But Seagal was never included in the actual Expendables movies. As much as I don't like him, he was one of the biggies back in the day.
Sorry, I've been doing martial arts for 85 years.
So we're basically going to have him play the same type of role that Chuck Norris played in Expendables 2. This movie ends dark. Mel Gibson has gone over to the dark side. Stallone has to kill him, or at least he thinks he did. And this basically fractures the Expendables team. Schwarzenegger, he goes off on his own. We're going to have Jackie Chan's character just retire, because I can't bear to kill off Jackie Chan. But as much as I hate to do it, one of these guys does have to die. And it's going to be the new guy. It's going to be Danny Trejo. At the end of the film, who's left? Stallone will still have Wesley Snipes on the team with him. We don't need to show Wesley Snipes getting arrested in this movie. We could just assume that that happens somewhere in between Expendables 3 and 4. But we got to have one new recruit. So even though he was the bad guy in the movie, and even though he and Schwarzenegger had a big fight together, we're going to bring Dolph Lundgren in. He's going to turn over a new leaf, and he is going to join Stallone and become an expendable. It kind of makes sense, because Dolph Lundgren's character in the actual Expendables movies, we see him kind of go back and forth in his loyalties. So having him start off as a villain makes some sense. I know I left out Van Damme and Bruce Willis and Harrison Ford, Antonio Banderas, but those guys, they have their parts in what would be Expendables 4, 5, and 6. So we don't need to have them in these early movies. As much as it would have been great to have Bruce Willis and Van Damme in their prime in these movies, they end up showing up in the second trilogy that happens many years later. So we don't include them here. I love the Expendables movies. I do. I know. They're terrible. They're terrible. But I grew up worshipping these guys as the action gods that they were. I would have loved to have seen them all in their prime. Even if the movies weren't great. Although I think with John McTiernan, Walter Hill, and Tony Scott directing these early Expendables movies, they had a chance to be good movies. Not just good action movies, but to be good movies. To see these men in their prime, together, shoulder to shoulder, or fighting each other, that would have been a hell of a good time. We'll never have it, but it's fun to imagine.